NBA free agency has now officially started. We've got players changing teams. Let's recap all of the deals so far. Day one is basically in the books, I think. I'm sure more stuff might happen, but that's fine. We're going to go at some point. Michael Bolton.
Thanks, Josh. It's Michael Bolton here, and it's time for another episode of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Let's get to it.
Let's get to it, indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily fantasy basketball podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd, and I'm mewing. I think that's how you use that word. I'm also the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com, and you can find me on Twitter as always at redrock_bball, on TikTok at redrock_bball, and on Instagram at Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Sports have slowed down, but you can still make every moment more with FanDuel because every day they're giving every customer a bonus or a boost. That is every day, all summer long. Go to FanDuel.com/LockedOn to learn more. Thank you also for making Locked On Fantasy Basketball your first listen every day. We are free. We're available on all platforms, so thumb it up and leave your comments down below. Bang it, double bang. Yeah, do all that. Today we've had a lot of shows release, NBA draft recaps. I've got one of those to come. That'll be tomorrow. For time reference sake, I'm recording this at 20 minutes to 1, 12:40 a.m. Eastern Time, Sunday. So free agency has started. There are a couple of big moves hanging out there, but they haven't happened yet, so I am just going to record this. So let's talk. We're going to talk in this show about the trades that I haven't really discussed, re-signings that have happened, plus players that have changed teams through the free agency period so far. But I'll tell you the two big ones that are hanging out there that we know are going to happen. Klay Thompson will not be going back to the Golden State Warriors. They've come out and said that is not happening. And the Clippers and Paul George have come out and said that he is not going back to the Clippers. It's done. It's over. But I can't really ever remember a situation where either a team or a player comes out and just says, we're not going back to our team, but doesn't have an announcement on what the next team is. But that happened with both of those today. That Klay is done with the Warriors, and the Clippers put out a statement, we're too far apart. Paul George isn't coming back. Clippers are in real trouble with that. We'll talk about some of the moves that they made. They were pretty active today in free agency, but that's going to make things really interesting in terms of just how this offseason is going to play out. I still imagine there are going to be some trades and things of that nature and so on and so forth are going to be happening throughout the next few days. But let's talk about what has happened so far through NBA free agency. And remember, there was a change in the rules where you could re-sign with your own team and negotiate with your own team prior to the opening today. So we'll talk about all those deals that have gone through as well. Let's talk about something that is going to have an impact for us in fantasy, and that is something that honestly I did not expect. Jonas Valanciunas, the big fella, goes to Washington. Why? I have no idea. It wasn't like he got a boatload of money. 3 years, $30 million is not very much. It's reserve money. New Orleans is now has no center. I don't know who is going to be there. Maybe they start Eve Missy. Maybe they have to. There's no one there. So more stuff still to come. But Valanciunas is now in Washington. Now, Washington also did an extension re-signing with Richaun Holmes. I mentioned this, it is a fake re-signing. It's just basically he had a player option for this year. He declined that player option. They re-signed him to the same contract for this year, making it 2 years, but then with a non-guarantee on the second year. So in essence, it's the same amount of money, but it just helps them with things like moving players around. But they've still got Holmes. They've still got Bagley. They drafted Alex Sarr, who I thought would be a center, but I'm going to guess that if you're bringing in Jonas Valanciunas and you've got Bagley, although Troy Weaver's there, if you've got Bagley, if you've got Holmes, you also had Tristan Vukcevic, which is another weird situation. So I guess they want Sarr to be a 4, but their starting 4 still is there. Kyle Kuzma. He still plays for the team. Could Kuzma play the 3? That sounds like an absolute disaster. But Bilal probably should be playing the 3. Well, maybe Bilal plays the 2. And then Jordan Poole is a full-time point guard. That means Kispert comes off the bench. But that means Bub doesn't start. So I still have no idea what to make of this team. That contract for Valanciunas suggests 20-minute-a-night player. But we need to find out what's going on. Because Valanciunas, Bagley, Holmes are all still there. Vukcevic, they had a non-guarantee, they had a team option on him They declined that. Well, they must have something in the works. Then they rejected the restricted free agency tag. So he's just an unrestricted free agent after they drafted him in the second round last year. So I don't know what the hell is going to happen with Vukcevic. I thought he showed it enough, but with Bagley, Holmes, Valanciunas, and Sarr, like, he's not going to play there. I would guess. That's just weird. But JV, I doubt that he is going to be a big priority fantasy value player. In 27 minutes, he absolutely would be. But I'm not 100% convinced that's what he's going to play. But we saw it with Dan Gafford. You're a center in the Wizards, there's not much going on behind you, then go for it. It means we definitely don't want Holmes or Bagley. And it will have an impact on Sarr because where is he playing? At the 4, at the 5, split between the two off the bench? I don't know. I don't know. A weird one. Just one that was out of the blue. This one, I feel like we heard a little bit of. We always sort of had the idea that Chris Paul was going to be waived by the Golden State Warriors. His contract made no sense for them to hold on to. It happened today. He was waived. And we had heard this, that there's a chance that it'll be good for the Spurs to get a point guard. And they did. They got Chris Paul. 1 year, $11 million. He will undoubtedly start, meaning that Trey Jones' value is not there, meaning they probably don't go and get another point guard. Obviously, Chris Paul is old. Chris Paul is not Chris Paul of even 2 years ago. And Chris Paul is probably going to get hurt at some point. So then that's when we use Trey Jones. But the situation for Paul is way better than it was last season when he was on and off the bench for Golden State and sharing ball handling duties. He'll be sharing it with nobody. I guess you could say Steph Castle, but this kills Steph Castle's fantasy value for this year. I don't think Steph Castle is a point guard anyway, but Steph Castle is not going to start over Devin Vassell or Chris Paul. I guess you could say that Vassell plays the 3, Castle could play the 2, and Champagny moves to the bench and is on the bench with Keldon Johnson, and then you've got Sohan and Wemby. Maybe, I guess you could say that, but we weren't drafting Castle anyway. But it also means that he is definitely not starting a point guard, 100% not starting a point guard, and maybe they don't view him as that. I think Chris Paul is going to be draftable, but it's going to be later in drafts. But this is a much better situation for CP3 than the situation that he was in last season. Najee Marshall moves across to Dallas. Marshall's one of those players where he's worked on his three-point shooting. Shout out to Fred Vinson. He's got good size as a defensive wing, and he moves for 3 years, $27 million. And as soon as this happened, I went, this means that they're not signing Derrick Jones Jr., and that's exactly what turned out. Jones, after starting those games in the finals, is gone. The Mavericks have made multiple moves here. There is a big chance that Marshall is a starter on this team, and there is equally sized chance that I have no interest in drafting him for fantasy. He's one of those guys that can fill that role, but it'll be limited minutes, I'm guessing, not 33 a night. And even then, he just doesn't do enough to matter for most people. But it means that someone like a Josh Green's not going to push into that. It means Omax Prosper is not going to push into Prosper. He's not going to push into that role. You got PJ at the 4. You got Gafford and Lively at the 5. Luka and Kyrie. And then it's Marshall at the 3. I'm guessing. That's what they do. But he would have some sort of a role. It's probably like a 23 to 25 minute a night role starting or coming off the bench because they did, like I said, made other moves, and we'll get to those in a second. This one is one of the bigger ones of the day, I think, and that is Kentavious Caldwell-Pope signing with your Orlando Magic. 3 years, $66 million with a player option. The Nuggets are annoying to me. They won the title, and then they let Bruce Brown go. That's not fair. They were limited in what they could do with Bruce Brown. Because of the initial contract they signed him to, they could not match that contract the Pacers gave, and he wanted the extra money. Good for him. He's going to make $50 million out of it. And then they thought, we'll use someone like a Christian Brown, Justin Holiday to fill in that gap. Obviously, they were not as good as they were the year before. And now they're losing Kentavious Caldwell-Pope with no real way of replacing him. So they're going to be pushing Christian Brown into that starting lineup, and let's be honest, he is nowhere near as good as Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. And this is clearly, I think, a money-saving move. Now, the reports are that the Nuggets offered a similar amount for the Magic, but go more. You desperately needed him. Pay more. And I know that someone said, we couldn't have signed him because we've got to extend Aaron Gordon next season. Well, you know what? Figure that out next season. This is, and someone had this, I think it was Nate Duncan who tweeted this out, and I added to it. It was like, it was Dan Feldman actually that had it and was saying that teams are using the limitations of the second apron and the first apron in terms of roster construction to limit their roster construction before they get to that. which is exactly the same as a coach pulling a player for having too many fouls to prevent them fouling out and then playing them fewer minutes anyway, in effect fouling them out before they foul out. Sure, maybe you'd run into a problem with money later on, but you're not there yet. Do it now. Give more to KCP. You could go over the salary cap to give him more money. Give more. You cheaped out again, Denver. And what they're going to be relying upon Christian Brown, and hopefully that someone like Julian Strouder, who's a 3-4, not a 2, or Jalen Pickett steps up, and they've already dumped Reggie Jackson to save money. Not that he's good, but they've dumped Reggie Jackson to save money, so they need a backup point guard now too. Cheap. Yes, the apron, this is part of how it is, but they could have done it this year. Cheap. As for KCP in the Magic, he will take the Gary Harris role, and he will start next to Franz Wagner, Paolo Banchero, Wendell Carter Jr., and Jalen Suggs. No idea what's going to happen with Markelle Fultz, whether he's back. Cole Anthony's a sixth man. Mr. Black is not going to have a big role. And KCP still won't be someone that I'm all that interested in for fantasy. He'll be interesting to stream, but not really a high upside draftable player. But he cashes in. He goes to a team that this is a huge upgrade for Orlando. Massive for them. They're probably done, although they are still allegedly in the market for Paul George. I don't think they can afford him now, though. But that is a huge, huge move. And that does change a lot of the power, I think, in the Western Conference. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. As we know, sports have quietened down through the month of June and July, but FanDuel's still got stuff for you. Because every day, all through the summer, even though baseball's on and WNBA's on, PGA, NASCAR, that's all still going. But FanDuel's going to give you a little bit of something extra on top of that. Every day, every single customer gets either a boost or a bonus every day, all through the summer. So, while you're looking at these summer sports and enjoying your time off, get across to FanDuel. Check out these daily boosts and bonuses that they're offering. Go to FanDuel.com/lockedon and start making the most of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball, and don't forget to gamble responsibly. If anyone's got a good reason why the Nuggets wouldn't bring KCP back, that's not like, oh yeah, we couldn't afford it later on, or didn't want to pay the tax. I never want to hear anything about people defending owners saving money. The Nuggets owners, Stan Kroenke, his missus owns Walmart. Stan Kroenke owns the Rams. He owns Arsenal. He's got a lot of money, fair bit of money. Yeah, he's doing all right. The second apron, in terms of restricting moves that can happen and all that sort of stuff, is a real thing. But you don't need to hamstring yourself before those rules hamstring you. And that's exactly what they've done. Hated it. Really, I really find it distasteful. Now, there are some trades that went down that I haven't really discussed on the show, so we're going to talk about those now. DeJounte Murray heads from the Atlanta Hawks to the New Orleans Pelicans with a fair bit going the other way. I think the Pelicans still need to make some moves because as things stand, there is no center on that team. There is DeJounte, CJ, Ingram, and Zion. There was some word that the Kings were looking to trade for Ingram. I really doubt that this team goes that unbalanced where both Herb Jones and Trey Murphy come off the bench and don't have enough minutes. Yes, Najee Marshall's gone. Yes, Dyson Daniels is gone. But I don't see how DeJounte and CJ and Ingram, all three, remain on this team. Murray could be in a spot where he's likely going to be in a spot where he can get more assists. Usage, well, that depends on who's there, because if Ingram, McCollum, and Zion are all there, that's actually a worse usage spot for DeJounte. But assist-wise, it will go up. And he probably needs to do less offensively, and maybe that means the defensive stats come up. That doesn't always work that way, though. So where he sits with his fantasy value is still a work in progress. Going the other way, again, we'll talk more about that once all that is settled. EJ Liddell goes from the Pelicans across to the Hawks. Not one that's really that big of a deal. This one could be Dyson Daniels going across from the Pelicans to the Hawks. As things stand, there's obviously an opening where Murray was. That could be Bogdan Bogdanovic. We expect that Ricochet will start over DeAndre Hunter at the 3, Jalen Johnson at the 4, and then it's the Capella-Okongwu dance again at center. Bogdan could start at the 2. Kobe Buffkin, maybe. Is it time for him to step up? Or does the defense and low usage and passing of Dyson Daniels work next to Trae Young? Maybe, I don't know. But that is one to watch. I don't think we'd be drafting Dyson necessarily, because even if we know that the Dustbuster is going to start, there is still Bogdanovic and there is still Buffkin who's going to get some of those minutes. And legendary Hawks player captain Vic Krejci. Maybe he's back. We'll see. The other player who went across in the deal was Larry Nance. So this is what I mean about the Pelican centers. They've got no JV. They've got Nance. These guys played all their minutes. All they have is Eve Missy. Now we've got Okongwu, Capella, and Nance for Atlanta. There's no way those three guys stay there. Nance can't play the 4. Okongwu played a little bit there, but I think more stuff has to happen. And I'm not sure whether Nance hangs around there or not. Whatever it is, I think Nance's time as a fantasy relevant player is probably over. And then we had this trade, which is I believe, absolute thievery. Unless Dallas gets Quentin Grimes from Detroit for 3 second-round picks and Tim Hardaway. Now, I would have thought to get off of Tim Hardaway's contract, you probably would have had to give up 3 second-round picks anyway, let alone why are you getting Grimes back? There are two things that I say about that. Grimes did not want to be in Detroit, and he may have passively or actively asked out. There is a possibility of that. He did not want to be there. All right, so that's possible. Or the second part of it, maybe his knee is completely rooted. Because 2 years ago, Quentin Grimes was a star on the rise, a guy that I thought in the right situation could be a very good fantasy player, a 30-minute-a-night starter. Things did not go well last year, and the knee bothered him for the last 3 months of the season. It could be legitimately just rooted, and it's just not going to happen. Now, as things stand, he's probably coming off the bench. Well, I don't think he's big enough to play the 3 anyway, and they just signed Najee Marshall. And it's him and Josh Green getting those bench minutes with Jaden Hardy. Nowhere near enough an opportunity for him to do anything there in Dallas. But that still feels like just theft. He's a very good young and up and coming player. Maybe I'm worried about the knee. And then on the other side of it, Tim Hardaway goes to Detroit for they want spacing. Is bro actually a good shooter? I know he claims to be. I don't think he is. He had one good quarter in the finals. Are they going to start him over Jaden Ivey? Am I going to have to lose my mind at their next head coach? By the way, they hired JB Bickerstaff, which, fine, he had some good moments, but I'm not super convinced he's a good coach, but we'll find out later over the next few years anyway. So is Hardaway just the sixth man there? How the hell does any of this work on that team? That team's still got a lot to do as well. Cade, Ivy. Cade hasn't signed an extension, is going to though. Looks like they're discussing it at the moment. Asar, Holland, Fontecchio, Stewart, Duran, still a messy rotation. Don't think we'd be touching Hardaway for fantasy. But who knows what they're going to do with it? Who knows? They're the two trades that I haven't really touched on. I talked about the Denny Avdia one a lot. Talked about the Mikal Bridges one a lot. What about some other signings now? The Cockroach, Mason Plumlee. He goes from the Clippers to the Phoenix Suns. The Suns obviously drafted Oso Ighodaro, Ryan Dunn, who's small ball center. They've got Yusuf Nurkic. There's no Drew Eubanks. There's Bol there, but Plumlee is going to slide in as the backup center. And if Nurkic gets hurt, Plumlee will start, and Plumlee will be a useful fantasy player in that moment. But a definite upgrade over Drew Eubanks. 1 year, about veteran minimum, $3.3 million for Mace. Eric Gordon goes, not the other way, but he leaves Phoenix, and Eric Gordon heads across to Philadelphia. All we know is that it's a 1 year deal. We don't know how much it is. It could be a veteran minimum. He opted out of his player option for Phoenix. I don't know how much he signed for. He would, I'm guessing, come off the bench, but that team is incredibly incomplete. At the moment, it's Maxey, it's Embiid, it's Jared McCain, and it's another player who signed there, which we'll talk about in a sec. So Gordon's not going to have fantasy appeal. I doubt that he's a starter, but we'll see what other moves they need to make. This is one that we've referenced already. Derek Jones Jr., as soon as that Najee Marshall deal came down, they were out of the Derek Jones Jr. business. It seemed like they were trying to make a lot of moves to get Jones back, but no, he's out, and he goes across to the Clippers now. Could he slide into the starting role left vacant now by Paul George? Even if he does, I don't think we need to care too much for fantasy. 3 years, $30 million for Derek Jones. He's the guy that occasionally can get some blocks, but he's a streaky shooter. I wouldn't expect big minutes, but I think the Clippers have still got more happening. Daniel Tice would probably look to come back as the backup center. They drafted Cam Christie. I don't think they'll use him much. But on the wing now, without PG, it gets a little bit desperate now about what they're going to be able to do. And I think Jones is going to get good minutes. That's not a big amount to sign him for. But we're not going to care that much. It just changes how that team sort of looks. They also brought in this guy, Kevin Porter Jr., cousin Kev. After being out of the NBA all last season, he played a small amount of the year over in Europe. The Clippers bring him in for a 2-year deal. Not really sure how much. They haven't announced that. The other report that came out about the Clippers, not only is Paul George gone, but they are moving on from Russell Westbrook. Westbrook opted into his player option, and now they're going to trade him. So they're out of the Russell Westbrook business. So ostensibly, I would guess that Porter is the backup guard, but I guess an argument could be made that he's a starter. Although, at the moment we've got Terrence Mann, Kawhi, James Harden, if it's a Zubats, and probably Derek Jones. But maybe Mann is the 3 and Porter is the 2. If Kevin Porter is a starter, I hope. Well, he won't take the ball out of Harden and Kawhi's hands. So that was part of his problem in Houston, is he was taking the ball out of other players' hands and was struggling. He put up okay numbers, but that didn't made the team terrible. And he's got numerous indiscretions on his record outside of the off-court stuff with his partner, with the domestic violence charges, where he ended up, they didn't actually go to court or get found guilty. There was all these weird conflicting reports. But that's not the only incident in Kevin Porter's past. There's a million other things that have happened. Team-based stuff, not even like partner violence. It's annoying that he's back, but I know it's easy to make the Josh Primo jokes. Josh Primo is not on the Clippers anymore. They cut him last year. They should never have signed him. That was an insane move anyway. But the Clippers don't seem to care about this stuff. So Kevin Porter's back. How that roster shakes out will depend on whether he is draftable. At this point, I don't think that he is. But with Paul George gone, there is an opening. Derek Jones fills some of it, but we'll see what else they decide to do in that spot. The other guy that has changed teams so far is the big avocado, Andre Drummond. He has gone to Philadelphia. The reporting on some of these contracts is weird. 2 years, 10 plus million. What does that mean? 10 and a half? 11? He's gone back to Philadelphia to be Joel Embiid's backup. RIP Paul Reed. Drummond is the backup. If Drummond starts when Embiid's out, we definitely roster him. He will be an interesting late round pick just because of Embiid's health. But if Embiid plays 34 minutes, Drummond in 14 has no use. You've got to be in a league where you don't use your roster spots every day, a weekly league, a deeper bench league, because as we say, we have standard fantasy rosters. The bench is not a bench. Every spot is an active spot, and you can't hold that most of the time for a man playing 14 minutes a night. It, again, obviously kills any value of Paul Reed. It means Mo Bamba's not coming back. Drummond will be the guy who'll be interesting and be an absolute must-roster player when Embiid is out. I really don't think there's any debate about that at all. All right, so that's all the players at this point that have changed teams. So let's take a look at the guys who have re-signed. The re-signings, the veteran re-signings. Pascal Siakam is back in Indiana. 4 years, $189.5 million. Malik Monk, back with the Kings, 4 years, $78. OG Anunoby, 5 years, $212.5 million with a player option, back with the Knicks. That's a lot of money for OG Anunoby, man. That is a huge deal, but they had to do it. Good for him getting that money. They had to do it. Nick Claxton is back with the Nets, 4 years, $100 million. Royce O'Neal, for some reason, is back with the Suns, 4 years, $44. That is a lot. 4 years for Royce O'Neal is an insane contract. Him getting more money than like a Derek Jones or even a Jonas Valanciunas is crazy. Crazy. Bol is back in Phoenix as well. 1 year, but I don't know the terms of that deal. But, of course, he's going to be playing behind Kevin Durant and probably Royce O'Neal and now Plumlee and Nurkic, and he's not going to be, I'm guessing, a regular part of the rotation. But new coach there, Mike Budenholzer, so maybe things are different. For some reason, the Denver Nuggets decided to bring back DeAndre Jordan again. I hope to God that it's to be the third-string center behind Daron Holmes, but I don't know. Alex Len is back in Sacramento, 1 year, 3.3. That's his veteran minimum stuff. And then Jim Harden returns to the Clippers, 2 years, $70 million. So without Paul George, Harden's usage is going to rise. We saw his scoring drop way off. He's not going to go back to a 32-point scorer. His assists are going to be very big, but his usage is going to go up. And there's potentially no Westbrook there as well, which gives a further boost to the Kevin Porter scenario. It's more just going to depend on what they do with him. 23 minutes of Porter's not enough. 30 maybe, but he will be in a third usage role, not the number one ball handler, which is where he got his numbers in Houston, plus his bad percentages, bad defensive stats. But James Harden returns and a big chance for a big boost in his numbers. Kevin Love goes back to Miami. 2 years, $8 million for Love. I would hope that he's not in a large enough role to matter. Luke Cornett and Neemias Queta are back in Boston. No terms announced. 1 year for Cornett, multi-years for Queta, but no idea of the dollars, no idea for the years for Queta at this point. But they are back and they are ready to go. We had some rookie restricted free agent signings as well. Emmanuel Quickley, not that we didn't expect these guys back on their teams, but this officially happened. Emmanuel Quickley, 5 years, $175 million in Toronto. It may be somewhat of an overpay. I'm not really sure it's that big of a deal. He will have a real chance of being a top 100 player. Actually, that's not true. Even higher, top 50 maybe. Patrick Williams back for $90 million in 5 years for Chicago. That seems way too much. Why are we locking into 5 years? 3 years, 50 would have been good, I reckon. He's shown nothing in 4 years to suggest that this is good. And they drafted Matas Buzelis to play over him. Now, if Williams and Buzelis are both there, that's going to kill Buzelis' value in fantasy this season. But, I would think that they would have liked to have benched Williams, but why are we giving him 5 years? Obert Toppin is back in Indiana, 4 years, $60 million. There is zero pathway for Jarris Walker, really. They claim he's going to play the 3. There's really no pathway for a big minute role there unless he just takes these huge steps and jumps ahead of Aaron Nesmith. But that team remains weird. Toppin is just not a fantasy guy for us. We don't need to worry about that. And then the last restricted free agent re-signing with their own team is Max Christie, 4 years, $32 million. Obviously, he hasn't really proven anything. $8 million per year is way more than he was on. I do think that he can become a rotation player, and I would think that the Lakers, if they're giving him that money, are expecting him to play in the rotation this season as a regular 15 to 20 minute a night player. That's a long way from being fantasy relevant, and we'll see what happens with D'Angelo Russell, who has opted in, and maybe he is traded. But who for, I don't know. They don't have a point guard otherwise, and Christie plays the same position as Austin Reeves. So that team still remains in flux. So some interesting moves, some players getting contracts and players getting drafted and players getting signed. We don't necessarily know how good their roles are going to be or if they're even going to be good at all. Before I boot out of here, I am going to just quickly look to see if there is any resolution on any more of the big free agent moves. So I'll just go check that out. And that's it. There's nothing else that has happened since I've started recording. So we're okay. We're back tomorrow with a day 2 recap and hopefully some resolution on Klay Thompson and on Paul George and any other moves that happen. And we'll see if any other trades go down or whatever else there is. In the meantime, thumb it up. Leave your comments down below. You are going to get the last draft recap show tomorrow, which is for the Atlantic Division, and including one team that made no draft selections at all, the Brooklyn Nets, which should be cool. But there is unsigned guys or undrafted free agents we'll talk about. Guys, we are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.